So, like any game, there has been some controversy surrounding Space Marine 2, and in fact, this controversy is kind of needlessly building up to a crescendo that, well, I don't think anyone really expected to come from the developers. Saber Interactive CEO Matthew Karch allegedly made some provocative comments on a YouTube video. They weren't really that provocative. The remarks were in response to a clip by Asmund Gold, where he was reacting to a video basically saying Space Marine 2 reminds us of what we lost. And within that video, it goes into explaining how this new game shows what games used to be like, how they used to be made. It was a pure story with no intentions other than telling a good narrative with fantastic gameplay and no extra needless faff. And it was fantastic. So what is the controversy about? Karch, the supposed CEO of Saber, reportedly expressed frustration with the current direction in the gaming industry, particularly regarding what he described as overblown attempts at messaging or imposing morals on gamers. According to the alleged comments, Karch said that Space Marine 2 was intentionally creating this as a throwback game, focusing on fun and immersion rather than complex moral narratives, which he felt dominated many modern games. He also reflected on his time at Embracer Group. If anybody doesn't aware, Embracer Group has been in a lot of hot water recently. Basically, they own a ton of companies and they laid off so many. One great example is Insurgency has been hit really badly by it, and well, so many more people have lost their jobs because of Embracer Group's lack of structure at this point in time. But he was working there, and he criticized some of the games he saw as focused on pushing specific messages, which he claimed, well, very much upset him and he wanted to do something about it, expressing a desire to return to a simpler time in gaming like, well, the old Halo games, where the focus was on engaging gameplay loops. He suggested that Space Marine 2 and other games like Black Myth Wukong should be and could be this part of a shift back to that older style, where the focus is just a good game rather than anything else. However, there has been some reports that Saber Interactive has declined to officially confirm whether this comment itself actually was from the CEO. Of course, it's got his name, but there can be no way to officially prove it unless somebody comes out with some receipts. This has actually left some fans divided, though, with discussions ranging from support of the perspective of the Space Marine 2 supposed CEO, or even criticism against, well, moral storytelling. But let's actually delve deep into this comment itself and see what we can gain from it. Hey man, CEO of Saber here, the developers of Space Marine 2. Love your videos. When we signed the deal to make Space Marine 2, all we wanted was a throwback game. We had the chance to work on something which, by its nature, was old school. I can't even comprehend many of the current games that we play these days. They are too complex and too much of an investment. We worked on Halo back in the day, and that game could be distilled down to the simplest shooting loops, but it was entirely addicting. That's what we wanted to recapture. I hope that games like Space Marine 2 and Wukong are the start of a reversion to a time when games were simply about fun and immersion. I spent time as Chief Operating Officer at Embracer, and I saw games that made me want to cry, with the overblown attempts at messaging or imposing morals on gamers. We just want to do some glory kills that get the heart rate up a little. For me, that's what games should be about. Now, most of the responses have actually been very positive on the video itself, and I would pretty much agree with everything said here. I don't think it particularly sways one side or the other, and in fact, I think so many people want to find something to get at when a game is successful. They want to find almost an Achilles heel to discredit the success of, well, one of the most old school games that we've had in such a long time. Space Marine 2 is a really great gameplay loop of shooting, hacking, and slashing Tyranids. The story is well put together, and it doesn't really do anything incredible, but it really is pretty engaging, mostly down to its authenticity, the Space Marine and Warhammer 40k lore. For people that know what they're talking about and know a lot about 40k lore, they're going to get a lot out of it, and people that don't, well, at least from my perspective, it really inspired me to actually go and do some more research, to invest some more time within this world, because it was so interesting. Everything from the Warp, the Chaos, Tzeentch, the Thousand Suns, the Tyranids, of course, Astartes, and how Primaris came about, Adeptus Mechanicus, all the captains, of course, and of course, even things down to how Dreadnoughts are formed, because we get to see stuff like this within the game, and it is so fascinating. Then we have the multiplayer and operations side, which let us look into into other chapters of Space Marines, from the Chaos chapters like Plague Marines and, of course, Khorne, all that sort of beautiful stuff, to, well, the Imperial Fist, the Salamanders, the Blood Angels, and being able to look in depth about how they work. I think for me, it's so inspired to get into the lore now, just because of, well, one game that has a satisfying gameplay loop and enough lore to keep people interested. And that's all it was. It isn't something groundbreaking and incredible, but they have broke ground with the player numbers, with the sales, being in the top 10 most played games on Steam in the last month or so, and of course, surpassing even the most optimistic of sales figures, selling over 2 million within the first week or so. It's absolutely insane. And for a game that is a sequel over a decade past the first, it's kind of incredible where they came from. And I think it is down to exactly what Matthew Karch says. Now, of course, there is once again no proof that this is the exact CEO of Saber. It could be anybody with his name, but I'm going to be honest, I think it's very likely. I think the reason that Saber haven't said anything or confirmed it is because, yeah, sure, you could take that as a controversial statement, and whilst it is one person being the CEO, Saber don't necessarily, or any company really, want to take any one person's opinion as the entire company's, well, MO. So I think they're just playing it safe. I don't think necessarily they disagree or even agree with what Matthew Karch is saying, but it's just the way businesses work. That's why people have all opinions of my own within their Twitter bios. As much as it's a bit cringy, it means that they don't have to represent everybody at the entire company just because they have one opinion. But I personally think that this opinion is pretty solid. There isn't really anything that's going after anybody else. There isn't really anything that is going one side of the political spectrum. It's saying we made a game that we love, and we didn't want to push anything on our players because, well, it's so unnecessary. And sure, you could take the part of saying he saw other games that were doing this and said, we don't want to do this, but people do that every day. You take what works and what doesn't work, and clearly this new era of games trying to impose morals on gamers isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but when it actually comes at a cost of good gameplay, well, it's been an absolute disaster for companies in the past, not just for their bottom line, but also for their fans. It has been a wild west in terms of whether a game's going to be good or not. You're really stepping on a landmine even with some of the most trusted franchises now, because you could have a game that was your childhood, but because of the way that modern gaming and as well modern journalism has become about, it's hard to actually trust a franchise to be good. There are very few companies that you can pre-order knowing that their next title is going to be a solid game, because it can switch so fast depending on which way the wind's blowing in the political landscape. So for a CEO to allegedly come out and say, we don't care what this political landscape is, this is the game we wanted to make, we had no intentions other than making it fun, I think is incredibly, incredibly positive. But I would love to know what you think. I think there has been so much going on with which way companies want to express their feelings or political messages, when I think people are very tired of it. And it doesn't necessarily mean they agree or disagree with one side of an argument. Sometimes people just don't want to have that argument. Sometimes people just want to go into the grimdark universe of 40k and hack and slash some Tyranids to watch a dreadnought put a machine gun, a fucking railgun, into the mouth of a chaos dreadnought and blast it open so wide, and then say, let me know where I can do that again, and then blast through 300,000 sun Terminators with ease. I think that's what people wanted to see. And that's what I wanted to see. And then I wanted to have a fight with a Tzeentch sorcerer whilst fucking embodiment of the Chaos God himself looks over me as I shoot him in the face with my bolt gun. Yeah, that's what I wanted. And that's what Space Marine 2 gave me. So, I'm not really complaining.